For centuries, the Bible has been read as both sacred scripture and a collection of ancient stories, but what happens when spades in the soil and fragments of parchment begin to confirm those very accounts? On a recent episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, the conversation zeroed in on archaeologists who just discovered a 3,000-year-old biblical evidence that changes everything we know. What if the story of Samuel hearing God's call, Eli's final days, and the Ark of the Covenant resting in Shiloh weren't just theological traditions? Well, the line between faith and history grows thinner than ever. Today, we'll unveil everything. Ancient Shiloh, the first central sanctuary. Situated in the hill country of Ephraim, about 31 kilometers north of Jerusalem, Shiloh is repeatedly referenced in the Hebrew Bible as Israel's first spiritual and political hub. The book of Joshua describes how, following the conquest of Canaan, the Israelites erected the tabernacle at Shiloh, making it the central place of worship and national gathering. For over 3 centuries, this site is said to have housed the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest that symbolized God's presence and guided the people of Israel through the wilderness. Before Jerusalem rose under King David as the heart of Israelite religion, Shiloh represented the first attempt at a permanent spiritual center. It was here that the young boy Samuel was dedicated by his mother Hannah to the priestly service. In the sanctuary, Samuel later heard God's voice for the first time, marking his emergence as one of Israel's great prophets. The site was also tied to the priest Eli, whose death followed news of the ark's capture by the Philistines in the Battle of Aphek. Beyond being a cultic center, it was also a gathering place for the tribes. For centuries, however, the precise historical reality remained elusive. Archaeologists began systematic excavations at Shiloh in the early 20th century, with work by Danish expeditions under Hans Kjær and later by Israeli scholars such as Israel Finkelstein in the 1980s. The site revealed remains of settlement layers stretching from the Middle Bronze Age through the Iron Age and into the Byzantine period, showing that Shiloh was occupied and reoccupied for centuries. Of particular interest have been layers dated to the Late Bronze Age, around 1550 to 1200 BCE, and the Iron Age, around 1200 to 1000 BCE, which overlap with the period traditionally associated with the judges and the early monarchy. Recent excavations, particularly those conducted since 2017 by the Associates for Biblical Research under the direction of Dr. Scott Stripling, have reignited debates about Shiloh's role. These digs have unearthed altar fragments, storage jars, and concentrations of animal bones that point toward organized ritual activity. Many of the bones belong to animals considered ritually clean in biblical law, sheep, goats, and cattle, and were found in deposits. This suggests mass feasting, possibly in connection with sacrificial rituals. The scale of these remains aligns with the biblical portrayal of Shiloh as a place where tribes gathered to worship and celebrate before the Lord. Additionally, stone fragments interpreted as parts of a monumental altar or cultic installation tell us that the vestiges of Israel's earliest sanctuary may indeed lie beneath the ruins. The discoveries gain further weight when viewed alongside the biblical descriptions of cultic practice. For example, Joshua 18 describes the division of the land among the tribes at Shiloh before the Lord, while 1 Samuel 1 recounts annual pilgrimages made by Elkanah and his family. The presence of large storage vessels uncovered at the site suggests provisions for feeding many people. Archaeologists have also noted the discovery of ceramic typologies from the Late Bronze to Iron transition, reinforcing the idea that Shiloh was not a minor village but a site of regional significance. Comparable discoveries at sites such as Orod, Beersheba, and Tel Dan have highlighted the prevalence of regional sanctuaries before the centralization of worship in Jerusalem under Solomon. At Shiloh, however, the concentration of remains and the biblical specificity elevate its importance. If the bone deposits and altar fragments do reflect large-scale sacrificial feasts, then Shiloh was far from a marginal cult site. It was a hub of ritual life for multiple tribes. The significance of Shiloh also extends into later history. By the time of the prophet Jeremiah, writing centuries after Samuel and Eli, Shiloh had become a cautionary symbol. Jeremiah 7:12-14 recalls how God allowed the sanctuary at Shiloh to be destroyed because of Israel's disobedience, warning Jerusalem that it too was not invulnerable. Archaeological evidence of destruction at Shiloh around the mid-11th century BCE, potentially tied to Philistine incursions, may correspond with this tradition. Whether the ark was truly captured and Shiloh devastated in the manner 1 Samuel describes, the convergence of destruction layers and biblical memory reinforces Shiloh's role as a site of both glory and loss. For believers, the finds at Shiloh are not just stones and bones but tangible confirmations that the places where biblical figures walked can still be touched. For scholars, the task remains to situate Shiloh within the broader landscape of ancient Near Eastern religion. It was a living, breathing sanctuary, where people gathered to worship, feast, and seek divine guidance long before Jerusalem's temple rose. That recognition alone changes how we view the origins of Israelite religion and the enduring power of its earliest sacred places. So, what do we know about it? What the evidence suggests? One of the most striking sets of finds has been the vast collection of animal bones uncovered in multiple excavation seasons. Studies led by the Danish expeditions in the 1920s under Hans Kjær, and later more recent teams including the Associates for Biblical Research in the 2010s and 2020s, revealed concentrated deposits of animal remains. These were not scattered randomly but instead accumulated in clearly designated areas that bore evidence of deliberate slaughter and disposal. Many of the bones show cut marks and burn traces, suggesting that they were part of ritual sacrifice rather than mere domestic consumption. Zooarchaeological analysis has identified a predominance of bones from kosher animals such as sheep, goats, and cattle, aligning with descriptions in Levitical texts of what could be offered in sacrifice. The concentration of right-side bones in some deposits is particularly striking, since biblical prescriptions emphasize offering the right portions in certain rituals. Moreover, large storage jars, some nearly a meter high, were found embedded in the earth near what appears to have been a substantial platform or courtyard. The jars suggest centralized storage and redistribution of offerings, possibly grain or wine, further supporting Shiloh's function as a cultic hub. Even more compelling are the foundations and wall segments uncovered that some archaeologists argue could have supported a large, rectangular structure. Although no complete building outline has survived, the dimensions of the remaining walls suggest a footprint large enough to accommodate a sanctuary or tabernacle-style complex. This possibility resonates with the biblical tradition that describes Shiloh as the site of the tabernacle and Ark of the Covenant before their relocation to Jerusalem under King David. The Ark of the Covenant, according to the Hebrew Bible, was housed at Shiloh for an extended period after the conquest narratives of Joshua. In 1 Samuel 3, the boy Samuel is described sleeping in the temple of the Lord, where the Ark of God was. This reference has fueled centuries of speculation about the precise nature of Shiloh's sanctuary. Was it a permanent structure built to house the Ark, or did the tabernacle, traditionally thought of as a mobile tent shrine, acquire semi-permanent housing here? Archaeological evidence cannot yet confirm either scenario definitively, but the presence of monumental remains indicates that by the early Iron Age, Shiloh was more than a simple village with a tent. The discovery of a large stone platform in the northern part of the site, first noted in Danish excavations and later revisited, adds weight to the idea of an organized cultic installation. If the Ark did rest at Shiloh, these remains could be the physical traces of its earliest long-term home. Despite the excitement, scholars have been careful to urge restraint in drawing conclusions. Correlation between archaeological finds and biblical narratives does not necessarily equate to proof. The animal bones, for example, could indicate ritual sacrifice, but ritualized slaughter was common across the ancient Near East. Sites in Canaanite and Philistine contexts have revealed similar deposits, sometimes with comparable patterns of species selection. Likewise, monumental structures and storage facilities are not unique to the Israelite religion. They appear in other cultures' cultic centers as well. Archaeologists such as Israel Finkelstein, who has extensively studied Shiloh and the highland settlements, argue that while the finds affirm Shiloh's role as a major highland sanctuary, linking them directly to the Ark or to specific biblical episodes remains interpretive rather than demonstrable. In any case, the biblical account in Judges 21 describes large annual festivals at Shiloh where the daughters of Shiloh danced in vineyards, hinting at gatherings that were social as well as religious. Archaeological signs of intensive activity align with the idea of such large-scale periodic pilgrimages. The discovery of ceramic assemblages spanning multiple regions supports this as well. Excavators have identified a major destruction event around 1050 BCE, consistent with the biblical narrative of Shiloh's downfall during the Philistine incursions described in 1 Samuel 4. That text recounts the Philistines capturing the ark after the Battle of Ebenezer, leading to Eli's death and the subsequent decline of Shiloh's centrality. While the ark's seizure is theological in tone, the archaeological evidence of a violent end to Shiloh's prominence at roughly the same time highlights the historical plausibility of the narrative framework. The destruction layer contained collapsed mud brick, burnt remains, and abandoned cultic vessels, all hallmarks of sudden catastrophe. Modern scientific methods have sharpened these findings. Radiocarbon dating of organic samples from relevant layers supports the early Iron Age timeframe, aligning with traditional chronologies of Israel's tribal period. Advanced zooarchaeological methods, including isotopic analysis, have been employed on bone deposits to determine the age and diet of sacrificial animals, providing further insight into ritual selectivity. The predominance of young male animals, for instance, parallels biblical preferences for unblemished offerings. Overall, the convergence of data points to Shiloh being the epicenter of a community whose religious practices closely resembled those described in the Hebrew Bible.